إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل له فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما ثم أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الحدي حدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Dear respected brothers and sisters, one of the things that we get sent a lot on social media, whether it be on Facebook or when we're even privately messaging each other in a group, in a WhatsApp group or a Telegram group, these inspirational stories of rags to riches. Or it may even be stories about a person who is going through tough times and they were able to get out of those dark moments. And sometimes, in America at least, they have these universities where one particular student, an outstanding student, addresses the whole of all the graduates. And sometimes they give these honorary degrees to famous people, celebrities, about how they became successful. By and large, these speeches tend to hinge on just a few words, just some advice that they were given when they were young. Sometimes that advice was given by their parents, by a teacher, a colleague. And these advices are things which really impact us, or it certainly did impact them, that made them change their lives for the better. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, "Ad-dinu nasiha," that the whole of the religion revolves around advice or sincerity. So this thing that we have in our possession, this advice that we can impart to others, is something that we should never disregard. But the best advice, it tends to be from people who have more experience than our own selves. So when someone who is older than us, who has naturally gone through things, more things that we have been through, then we should pay attention. But the best advice that we can take is the advice of scholars. Because the more and more they interact with people, the more and more they grow, the more and more they interact with even people who are not alive, in terms of the scholars of the past, through the books, the more precious their advice will be. But the question is how is it that scholars would advise other scholars? And I used to think about this quite often. Now maybe I find a particular person, a particular Muslim personality or a scholar to be an inspiration. But who would be the inspiration of this inspiration? Maqir al-Jazari rahimahullah, he said something really amazing. He said that when the scholars would meet one another, they would give advice. And this advice, it hinged on three things. And these advices, even if they were not able to meet one another, they would at least write letters to one another with three particular advices. And these are three advices, brothers and sisters, that we should live by. The first one is the one who fixes his relationship or her relationship with Allah, then Allah will fix that person's relationship with others. Brothers and sisters, I just want you to reflect. I'm going to give you just a few seconds to think about the types of du'as that you make. When you're making du'a to Allah, what du'as are you making? Maybe the du'a that you make is about, oh Allah, my son, my daughter, they don't listen to me. Make this person listen to me. Oh Allah, I'm having quite a few problems with my wife, with my husband. Oh Allah, I'm having loads of issues at work. My manager, my supervisor, he's always making life difficult for me. If we notice the types of du'as, or the du'as, many of the du'as, if not most of the du'as that we make, it's all about other people. It's all about the relationship that we have with other people. But have we ever thought, brothers and sisters, that the way to rectify those relationships is to rectify the relationship that we have with Allah? Whenever anyone has a problem, anything, any problem can be solved with a conversation, by communication. But sometimes it's a problem, it becomes a big problem when one party refuses to speak to the other, or when one party refuses to compromise, or when one party refuses to change their ways and they're very stubborn, they refuse. What do you do in this situation? You still have that conversation, but perhaps not with that person, but with Allah. Allah is the key to the relationships that we have with other people. If we don't have a strong relationship with Allah, we will not be able to have a strong relationship with others. You know, one of the things that some of these self-development courses teach you, and it's a really powerful thing actually, and it's Islamic as well. They teach you that some of the problems that you have in life is based on the relationship that you have with your parents. If you don't have a strong relationship with your parents, there's something going on, there's something wrong. And even one sheikh, who does a lot of counseling, he told me the same thing as well. He said, sometimes when someone is rebelling, someone's falling into major sins, something's really going on, there's something not right in the house. But beyond that, what kind of relationship do we have with Allah? Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, whenever I used to have a problem, maybe there was some puzzle that I couldn't work out, there's one mas'ala I couldn't understand. What I would do is that I would go in sajda, and I would ask Allah Jalla wa Ala 1,000 times or more, oh Allah, give me the knowledge of Dawood and Sulaiman, alayhim as-salam. Hudayfa ibn Yaman, radiallahu anh, he said, if there was anything bothering the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, any issues, any problems, then the first thing that he would do is that he would communicate with Allah. He would talk to Allah in the form of the prayer. Some of the scholars of the past, they said that we knew that if our wives were being, we were having problems with our wife, or we knew that if our ride, the camel or the horse that they were riding, if it was playing up, we knew that this was due to our sins. So this is the first advice that they would give. That whoever is able to fix their relationship with Allah, then Allah will fix that person's relationship with others. The second advice that they would give is, if you fix what is that you do privately, Allah will fix what happens to you publicly. Everyone is worried. Everyone is cognizant of how they are viewed in public. If that wasn't the case, then the sins that we do in private, we would do in public. But we do these sins privately because we don't want others to know about it. But how do we view our relationship with our own selves privately in comparison to that relationship that we have with ourselves publicly? What good deeds are we putting in front of Allah Jalla wa Ala privately, and yet we do those, and perhaps we may not even do many, but we don't do those sins, we don't do those good deeds publicly. Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah, he said that any deed that I do publicly, I don't even regard it as a good deed for myself. If you are having issues in the daytime, the way to fix it is in the nighttime with Allah. What good deeds are we putting forward for those things that we're doing privately? And the scholars, they would say this as a form of trying to awaken our iman. You know, one of the most often asked questions that people say, they ask, is that, sometimes my iman is low, what can I do? In reality, this thing is, maybe it's a feeling of iman. Whenever you're doing things which are in obedience to Allah Jalla wa Ala, then these are things that naturally your iman is going to go up, whether you feel it or you don't feel it. But people ask this question often, especially in this country where we're in the environment in which we live in. Incidentally, one of my friends who is a graduate from one of the Islamic universities, he was standing with one of the scholars, one of the big scholars, and he just met him in Makkah. And he said to him, and obviously he has a lot of interaction with scholars, but he was trying to get the attention of this particular sheikh. And he tried to kind of blag it and say, Sheikh, I'm from England, even though he hasn't been to England for the last 7 or 8 years because he's been studying all that time. He says, what advice do you give us in this beautiful month of Ramadan to how to increase our iman? And this sheikh said something really interesting. He said, maybe I should be asking you this advice rather than you asking me. Because you live in an environment where your iman is going to go up and down more than in this country, more than living in an Islamic Muslim environment. So maybe I should be taking tips from you, techniques from you. But one of the things that we can take is that one of the ways of awakening the strength of iman within ourselves, even if we do not necessarily feel it, is to do private deeds. Private deeds. To do it away from the people. And this is the reason why some of the scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah and others, they would say that do not let one day pass except that you have done a secret deed that no one knows except Allah. When we do small deeds, just compare your public with your private. Maybe when you're in public, you'll be praying, and then you'll do like these maybe some long surahs and whatnot. But when you're private, then you'll do the Inna A'tainaka al-Kawthar surahs, and that's it. You do it really quickly. If that's the case, then we have to change that. Because if we want Allah Jalla wa Ala, although this is not the only reason, but this is perhaps one of the factors, one of the reasons that we can gain, is that if we want Allah Jalla wa Ala to fix our public, then we have to focus on our private. One of the scholars of the past, Abul Hasan al-Mawardi, rahimahullah, he's a great Shafi'i scholar, and he wrote so many books in the Shafi'i madhab and other madhahib. And he was worried for himself. He wrote this one particular book, and he wrote this book privately without anyone knowing. Even his own students, they didn't know about this. And when death was close to him, he completed it. And he said to one of his students that, I want you to be there with me on my deathbed. And I want you to hold my hand. And when you hold my hand, if I hold it really firmly, with great strength, then know that this book that I wrote was done without ikhlas. And I want you to throw it in the Euphrates River. But if, when holding my hand, it is soft, but I hold it in a soft manner, then know that this is something that I've done with ikhlas, and I want you to spread it. That book is published in 5 or 6 volumes and is considered to be a classic, one of the best books written in that madhab. How many good deeds do we do privately, brothers and sisters? What do we put forward for Allah Jalla wa Ala? Because anything that we do publicly, it is tainted with riyah. It is tainted with doing things perhaps for acceptance from the people. Now that doesn't mean that, like for instance, like Jum'ah, do we start doing Jum'ah like privately, secretly? No. Because the scholars, they said that there's three levels when it comes to private and public. The first one is that the public is better than the private. And there's no way around that. So for instance, when a person does the adhan, they have to do this publicly. It's not possible to do it privately. When you do the Jum'ah and you have to do it publicly, you have to do it publicly. There's no possibility of you doing it privately. So there's times when the public is better than the private. But then there's also times when the private is better than the public. Doing secret deeds sometimes is better than doing it publicly. Sometimes one of the people who are under the seven under the shade of Allah Jalla wa Ala, where there's no shade except his shade, is a person who gives with his right hand that which his left hand doesn't even know. There are times where that is the case. But maybe you're in a fundraiser and you want to encourage other people, and so you do it publicly. You want to be the first person, so it makes it easier for everyone after you. If you do it with that intention, then maybe this is better than you doing it privately. But it all depends. But other than all of these things which are quite relative, how many good deeds are we doing privately? Because these things that we can do privately, they are not something which are difficult to do. When we were walking down, example, from our house to the masjid, or from the car to this masjid, we could have been making adhkar, and no one except the angels who are writing our good deeds will know about this. When we are on the train, as an example, and then there are non-Muslims who are all around us, and they're probably thinking, this guy is just reading a book. He may be reading the Quran. This is a form of a secret deed. The scholars, they would go to so much effort to cover their good deeds that they would do publicly, hoping that they will be done, that they will be acted as something which is private. One of the greatest things that Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah mentions in his incredible book Siyar al-A'lam al-Nubala, where he actually lists down and gives a detailed biography of all the scholars from day dot all the way to, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ up to his time. He told us about an individual by the name of Dawood al-Hindi, where what he would do is that he would fast every single day for 40 years, and no one knew about this. And it's only by accident that they found out. His wife would give him lunch, and then she would think that he would be having a normal day, not fasting. He would go out into the street, find a person who's quite poor, give this poor person his lunch, and he would be fasting the whole of the day. The scholars of the past, they would sometimes put some kind of, go to extreme measures in order to just make out as though they are not fasting. Sometimes they would chew, pretending that, just to show other people that, I am not fasting today. Or that the fact that, they put something on their lips or near their lips to show that it seems that this person's been eating, or that this person's been eating. They would go to extreme measures to make those public actions private. But unfortunately, what we do is that we go to those very same extreme measures, not to cover up our good deeds, but to cover up our sins. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, because we shouldn't normalize sin. We don't want sin to become something which is so adhar, which is so apparent that it just becomes normalized in society. This is how sin spreads. But what effort are we making, brothers and sisters, in terms of our private deeds? Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, shalla la ilaha illa anta. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So from these three advices that the scholars would give to other scholars, is that whoever fixes their relationship with Allah, Allah will fix their relationships with other people. The second advice that the scholars would give to other scholars is that if you take care of your private deeds, or what you do privately, then Allah Jalla wa Ala will take care of you of what happens to you publicly. The final advice that they would give, the third advice that they would give, is that if you fix your akhirah, Allah will fix your dunya. Brothers and sisters, it is not possible to love the dunya and the akhirah equally. It is like a scale. If you love one more than the other, then there will be a tip of the balance. But it is not possible to love them equally. But what you can do is all of those things which are related to the dunya, you can get reward for them by relating them to the akhirah. So for instance, the scholars, and this is the reason why the scholars get so much reward, is because they have these clever ideas and thoughts. That every mundane action that they would do, they would have the intention to change it from something which is just mundane and something which, generally speaking, you wouldn't get much reward for, and they would change their intention so that they would get reward. That when they would go to sleep, they would say, "Oh Allah, I am sleeping here not for my own enjoyment, so that I can gain strength from this, so I can worship you better tomorrow. Or I'm eating this food in order for me to strengthen myself for what comes after." But the point is, brothers and sisters, it is not possible to love the dunya and the akhirah equally. Something has to give. But just remember, brothers and sisters, that this life that we have here is just a fleeting thought. You know, when people, they write biographies, and if I were to interview you, tell me about your life, you won't be able to go beyond the day. When someone has an autobiography of themselves, and you put it in an audio format, you make it into an audio book, maybe it'll be 6 hours, 7 hours, 14 hours maximum. Maybe, this is after a lot of research. This is after a person has gone through so much effort to try to remember the things that have happened to them in their past. But if I were to interview you, how long would that conversation last? Half an hour, about everything that happened to you in your life? Is that what your life is really worth? Your life is just al-yawm wal ba'da yawm. It's just a day or a part of a day. Not more than that. But the akhirah is something that is there forever. As Luqman al-Hakim rahimahullah, he gave that incredible advice where he said that put effort into the dunya according to how much you're going to live in the dunya, and put effort towards the akhirah according to the time that you're going to live in the akhirah. When we look at it from this perspective, then everything will become clear. All the dunyawi problems that we have, they will be put into a particular box in the context of the akhirah. You know, the problems that the Prophet ﷺ went through, they were unbelievable. We would not be able to take 1/10 of the problems that the Prophet ﷺ went through. But his heart was not here in the dunya. It was always in the akhirah. He was always thinking about that. He did not allow the dunya to preoccupy him to the extent that he became depressed, or he became so sad that he became incapacitated. No. The next day is another day. That is the attitude that he used to have. Whatever happened to him, it happened. Qadarullah ma shafa'at. And that is what we need to do as well. I ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to make us of those that if we have a good relationship with Allah, that He gives us a good relationship with Allah so that He gives us the best relationship with others. I ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to fix our private so that our public will be rectified. I ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to make us of those who always gives more importance to the akhirah than to the dunya. I ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to keep us all in safe health and to protect us and to be of those who have a long life in obedience to Allah Jalla wa Ala. I ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to help all of those who are oppressed. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك واقم الصلاه.